Let's hurry. There is nothing to fear here.
That's what scares me.
Today is a glorious day. Today we're going to see something even rarer than a good webtoon. A positive review of a good webtoon. Your Letter is an incredibly charming and heartwarming webtoon about a young girl struggling to find her way in the world. While this webtoon did initially receive lots of praise when it was first released in 2018, the hype of this short but sweet webtoon has all but died down, with very few people actually remembering this powerful webtoon. So I have reread this entire comic for us to see if it still holds up for us today, and let's just dive right in! Our story begins with a flashback where we are introduced to one of our main characters, Sori. We're shown that Sori has insane principles and morals compared to those of her other middle school classmates. She won't hesitate to stand up for herself and lend a helping hand, and unfortunately these morals soon lead her to becoming a target by bullies in her school, which Sori had been somewhat accepting since she had her friend Julia by her side. But when her friend Julia makes the decision to leave and transfer to another school, Sori can't help but feel left behind by the one person that stuck by her when times were tough. So in order to escape the bullying as well, Sori makes up her mind to leave her school and transfer back home where she had lived when she was younger. While it might have been a place she knew when she was younger, since she had spent so much time away, it's pretty much new and unfamiliar to her now. It's really interesting to me that even though the stakes are low in this situation, Sori's display of morality still has consequences. I was always told from a really young age that if I did the right thing, then everything would always work out in my favor.
It's a total fabrication.
But Your Letter does a really good job of smacking you as well as Sori in the face just for having such unrealistic ideas. Sori didn't get praise for standing up for Julia, and hell, even Julia ends up leaving Sori behind. It's just a really simple way of showing readers the real-world consequences just for having morals. Unlike in webtoons like To You Who Swallowed a Star, where Ju defends young Heijin against his abusive dad, everything works out in her favor pretty much instantaneously. Her bond with Heijin becomes nearly unbreakable, he trusts her, and he falls in love with her. But realistically speaking, this wouldn't happen in real life, which is why Your Letter does such an excellent job at showing us that your problems won't instantly go away after one act of courage, but things could actually get worse. At her new school, we see the lingering fear of being bullied, judged, and picked on is still a very big issue with Sori. Even though none of her classmates have given her a reason to feel left out or targeted, that's still just the way she feels. It's a very realistic view on how life events or bullying or tragedy shape how we react when said event has ended and time has passed. Because, well, yes, time has passed for Sori and she thought everything would go back to normal after her move. She can't shake how she feels. She still feels the weight of her past actions after time has gone by. This is when Sori discovers a letter that has been taped under her desk, seemingly left there for her and her alone, full of goodies like a map of the school and pictures of all the students for Sori to learn. This first letter then starts her on a scavenger hunt to find more secret notes left throughout the school for Sori to discover. And this is only the beginning of the story. All of this has happened in chapter 1. Do you have any idea how rare it is to find an interesting webtoon that won't first shove narration and exposition down your throat? A webtoon that won't spend endless chapters first explaining to you why a story is happening and why we should care? I'm looking at you, wished you were dead. Stories don't need to start with tedious character introductions. This isn't some kind of meet and greet at a corporate Christmas party. We could have figured out who the characters were without the name tags. Readers aren't stupid. I mean, some webtoon readers are, but come on, most of us aren't. We could have figured out that people are gossiping about the main character without actually hearing what they're saying. We're not blind to the art that's being shown to us. Did we really need the narrator telling us it was their 1-year anniversary, or could we have just figured it out on our own? Readers aren't some brain-dead caveman with no media literacy. Stories don't need to start with the background and stats of why characters act certain certain ways. They can simply just start. I think the author of your letter, Haeyeon Cho, does this excellently. They introduce us to our protagonist without needing to put her in a name tag, and they introduce the hook of the story to the audience in the first chapter. Right away, I'm invested. Who wrote these letters? How many more are there? Will Sori get used to being in a new and unfamiliar environment? Boom, done. See how easy it was? Wished you were dead. Be better. This comic makes me wish I were dead. Ayo. So Sori continues on her scavenger hunt, learning the secrets and people of the school as well as her classmates. One of these character introductions is for Eugene, a reserved but assertive boy who is in another class. I really loved how he was introduced completely silently. There were no formalities from Sori's point of view as well as ours, just her silently observing Eugene from a distance, wondering if he could be the one writing the letters to her. This interaction really makes me feel like I was also silently watching Eugene from a distance. Not in a creepy way though. I loved the fact that I was just as clueless as Sori. There weren't any title cards that appeared strictly for the reader's benefit. There were no whispers from random people hanging around that this was Eugene! He's been upset since his friend moved away! We, the audience, were left to make our own inferences about Eugene just like Sori did. I find it really obnoxious in webtoons like The Princess's Jewels, for example, where the story comes to an absolute and complete halt just to introduce the reader to a new character with the help of overtly drawn title cards for each character. These title cards don't actually need to be here. They're just a really lazy way of introducing the readers to the characters. It's not a Vogue photo shoot where characters pose for the cameraman.
Headshot, body shot, paparazzi, twist and body. Headshot, body shot, looking nasty, turn and shot.
This isn't a pre-WWE tournament interview where someone tells us the stats of each fighters. This is a story. Well, your letter is a story. The Princess's Jewels is just a softcore porno.
Body shot, paparazzi, twist and body. Headshot, body shot, looking nasty, turn and shot.
Pretty early on in the story, Sori finds out that Yeon, someone we've never seen before, is the one who's been writing her the letters. And as she goes about collecting the letters, Sori finds herself running into Yuji. The fourth letter leads Sori to the school Rabbit Den, where her fifth letter tells her that every student has a job at the school to help build community with each other. The letter suggests that she should help take care of the rabbits. And this is where Eugene appears and discovers that Sori has accidentally let two of the rabbits out of the pen, so they hunt for the rabbits together. As the pair talk and search together, Eugene picks up on the fact that Sori knows a lot more about the rabbits than a new student would, and comes to the conclusion that her and Yeon are, or at least were, friends at some point. While Sori doesn't deny this, when she asked Eugene if he also is friends with Yeon, Eugene denies it, with Sori picking up on the fact that he looked angry when he said that. This is normally the part in other webtoons where the author will take us through a very long and detailed story regarding Eugene and Yeon's friendship. But we actually just move on. Sori didn't feel the need to ask further questions or pry since she could tell the subject was sore between Eugene and Yeon. What's the point of explaining to the readers a backstory if the main character isn't even there to hear it? As Sori continues to go about her days searching for the letters, she starts using the knowledge that the letters have given her to actually help her adjust to the new school and classmates. She finds herself growing to like her new school through all the small and unseen secrets it has to offer. The letters had helped her find the rabbits in the previous episode. They also helped Sori learn about shortcuts and pathways to get around the school easier. The earliest note had even helped her learn her classmates' names really quickly. It's so interesting to go about the story with only the knowledge Sori has and be able to learn the same things our protagonist is. I don't think I've ever actually been put in the main character's shoes in any webtoon I've read, good or bad. In more well-known webtoons, you'll find yourself questioning what the hell is going on alongside of the protagonist, but they usually seem a lot less unfazed or bothered by what's going on. Like in Baby Tyrant, the main protagonist, who is an adult woman reincarnated into a baby, just more or less goes along with whatever's put in front of her. The author really misses the opportunity to show, not tell the audience, as well as the protagonist, what is going on. Dialogue like, "That's right, I was reincarnated as a baby," or "The place I was born is called the Imru Empire," or "My name is Mabel Gardenia Emru." through is really clunky and out of place. Who was that for? Why is the protagonist who is experiencing this new world with us the one explaining what's going on? We could have experienced this new world together so we would feel and understand the same things the protagonist is without needing to have done so much footwork. But I guess shoving all of this down the reader's throats was much more important for the story. As Sori attempts to find her next letter, she winds up discovering a secret fort, and she also runs into Eugene. Now we get a few background episodes on Eugene, and apparently he had a friend Sean who wasn't that much of a friend anymore, who essentially uses Eugene to get out of school duties as well as lying to his mom for him. This all comes to a head when Sean sets the school greenhouse on fire with students in it and is planning on letting the groundskeeper Sunny Kim take the blame for it. Not wanting to let this happen, Eugene confronts him about it, and while Eugene might have put up with Sean's antics when it didn't necessarily harm anyone, his character really shines when he shows the audience he is just as strong-willed as Sori is. The fight plays out in a really interesting way compared to most other webtoons, where we the audience are put at a huge distance from it. It's not played out in a flashy or hyper-stimulating manner like a lot of other webtoon fights we see. It just happens silently. It has a very Ghibli-esque way of showing us that the emphasis shouldn't really be put on the fight, but more on the fact that the fight occurred in the first place. Eugene finally standing up to Sean. So they get into this fight, and Eugene ends up taking off into the nearby mountains next to the school. This is where Yeon finds him, a little beaten up and worn out from the fight he and Sean had been in. Yeon had come up to the mountain to find Eugene after the fire. Yeon was basically the only student who wanted to help Eugene, and this actually touches Eugene to the point of opening up to Yeon about the situation. While Eugene wants to repay a debt to Sean for taking care of his younger brother Daniel, he can't let Sunny Kim take the blame for the fire. Eugene ends up being the one to take the blame for the fire and tells Sean he never wants to see him again. And while Eugene is on his 2-week suspension for the fire, he and Yeon's friendship blossoms and the pair end up growing close. The friendship even continues long after the suspension as the year continues to go on. We flash forward to the first day back from break and Eugene coming to discover that Yeon had left the school without so much as a goodbye to Eugene. This action makes Eugene slightly resent Yeon as the year continues. The flashback ends and we the audience come to find out that the previous flashback episodes have been being told to us as well as Sori for the first time. This is probably one of my favorite panels in the entire comic. I truly felt immersed in the story and was delighted that Sori got to hear it with me. It wasn't a needless flashback for my sake, it was Eugene explaining his experience to Sori and how he felt slighted by Yeon, since Yeon didn't seem to have enough time to leave him any mysterious notes like he did for a complete stranger. Do you know how rare it is to find a webtoon without needless flashbacks strictly for an audience's benefit? Finding storytelling like this is something akin to finding a boomer without lead poisoning. Go Away Romeo? Flashback. Baby Tyrant? Flashback. Dragon King's Bride? Flashback. And it's not like you can't tell a good story by using flashbacks, but when the flashback is more interesting than the story itself, I usually find myself asking, why didn't we just get this story instead? Haeyeon Cho just did such an excellent job at storytelling, I can't help but gush about it. Their use of flashbacks and character introductions are truly one of a kind. I'm going to stop about halfway through the story and stop spoiling it, since I actually want you guys to go and read this comic if you haven't already. The ending is adorable, and I sobbed like a damn baby.
I love it.
Where do I even begin with your letter? Everything from the art to the story to the characters was damn near perfect. The comic does a super good job of introducing Sori and her problems and the starting action of the comic. I was completely sucked in and I loved every panel. I really liked the main conflicts being set in middle school because even if I'm not the same age as the main character, I can still relate to the feeling of being bullied or left out or just having sheer anxiety when I make a huge change in my life like Sori did. I would have loved, when I was Sori's age, to have found mysterious letters from an anonymous friend that doesn't care that I'm new or different, because even in strange new places, everyone needs someone. This is just an insanely charming and heartwarming story. Honestly, during my read-through, I couldn't help but feel as if the comic reminded me of a Studio Ghibli film. While not every panel was crammed full of detail or crazy backgrounds, the more simple panels would lead my eye to focusing on panels that truly mattered. The artist Taeyeon Cho did such an amazing job with understanding the balance between the art, story, and everything else being presented to us. The colors, panels, everything was so nice to look at.
No, I don't think you understand. I'm obsessed.
I never felt visually overwhelmed while I was reading. I could tell exactly what was happening and what the characters were thinking just based on the art. The comic is chock full of charm and character, and it's just so damn pretty. Unlike in comics like I Am the Villain, the comic is counting on you being wowed by the overuse of 3D models and flowers and assets and glossy Vogue character posing. Your letter just simply focuses on what matters in the art. I also really loved the character introductions between the main characters as well as the background characters. They all talk in a really realistic and believable way I could totally see middle schoolers talking to each other like. One of my favorite instances of this was when Sori first went to Sunny Kim's office in the greenhouse and a few of the students spotted her and were baffled that Sori was there, saying, "Someone's in the witch's den. Why would she go into that creepy place?" Describing the nice groundskeeper as a witch and the green room as a witch's den is excellent. I can instantly tell that none of the students interact with her and are probably a little nervous around her without a common Webtoonian over-explanation of why they do the things they do for the reader's benefit, rather than us getting a few flashes of images of her looking terrifying with a scary narration put over the top like a certain comic I can think of. All we really needed to understand the dynamic between Sunny Kim and the students was 2 lines of dialogue that were not even directed at Sori. Along with the character introductions, the story visually gives a really good idea of each of the students and what they do in their free time. When Sori eats lunch with her classmates, they all give Sori a pretty simple explanation as to why they're eating lunch from home outside rather than in the lunchroom with everyone else. With Emily saying her family owns a side dish store, and instantly I can imagine that she goes home to help her family with the business as well as getting to enjoy side dishes that her family lovingly makes. Your Letter was a beautiful comic that I loved reading, and dare I say it, it was damn near perfect. Honestly, I rarely give a comic or movie or show such high praise. You might not have noticed, but I'm a bit of an ass, and I have a tendency to have a very critical view of the media I consume in my free time. But with Your Letter, I was absolutely sucked into the story and world being presented to me. I loved reading this comic when it first came out in 2018, and I still adore it now. Everything from the plot and characters and art and dialogue were perfect. I couldn't help but feel enticed into the journey just as Sori had. I could feel the pain Eugene was in from losing a friend so suddenly. Your Letter is a comic that makes me feel absolute joy for creation, and if you haven't read this comic already, you'd be doing yourself a disservice by not checking it out.